Aristotle's dedication to understanding the natural world was nothing short of revolutionary, and the scale of his commitment to observation and empirical research remains staggering even by modern standards. Unlike many of his contemporaries, who largely confined themselves to abstract speculation, ethics, mathematics, politics, and cosmology, Aristotle deliberately engaged with life in all its tangible, often messy complexity. Where Greek philosophers had traditionally shied away from the material, the bloody, or the profane, Aristotle saw in the living world an inexhaustible source of knowledge, a terrain where ideas could be tested, patterns discovered, and principles articulated. He did not view the dissection of animals as distasteful or irrelevant, as many others did. Instead, he approached it as a method of accessing truths that could not be discerned by reason alone. His belief was simple yet profound: to understand life, one had to confront it directly, in its visible and hidden forms. Over the course of his years at the Lyceum, Aristotle personally examined an extraordinary number of animals. Sources suggest he studied hundreds of different species, ranging from common domestic animals and birds to exotic marine creatures, unusual fish, and rare insects brought to him by sailors, fishermen, and travelers from across the Greek world. This was not a casual hobby or occasional demonstration. It was a systematic, lifelong enterprise. He catalogued, measured, and compared the bodies of animals with a level of precision unmatched in the ancient world. His notebooks, many of which survive indirectly through later commentaries, contain detailed descriptions of anatomy, illustrations of skeletal structures, observations of musculature, and even notes on behavior and habitat. From the intricate structure of the octopus's limbs to the reproductive mechanisms of sharks, Aristotle's studies encompassed both the microcosm and the macrocosm of the natural world. The unprecedented aspect of Aristotle's work lies not merely in the act of dissection but in the philosophical and methodological rigor with which he approached it. He was not content to collect curiosities or document strange creatures, he sought understanding. He examined every organ, every system, every form in search of functional relationships and underlying patterns. His teleological framework, the belief that nature does nothing in vain, drove him to ask not only what structures were present but why they existed and how they served the organism. The chambers of a bird's heart, the wing of a bat, the segmented body of a crustacean, all became evidence of purpose, design, and function. Though Aristotle lacked knowledge of evolution or genetics as we understand them today, his insistence on systematically connecting form with function laid the foundation for centuries of biological thinking. Aristotle's methods extended far beyond the study of anatomy. He observed animal behavior in the wild, tracking migration patterns, breeding cycles, and feeding habits. He noted, for instance, the color-changing abilities of cephalopods, the social and reproductive behaviors of bees and fish, and the vocalizations and mating rituals of various species. In each case, he combined empirical observation with analytical reflection, often corroborating first-hand experiences with accounts from trustworthy sources, such as sailors, farmers, and hunters. Even when relying on second-hand information, he carefully assessed its credibility, demonstrating an early appreciation for the challenges of data collection and verification. His writings, particularly History of Animals, Parts of Animals, and Generation of Animals, represent not only detailed records of observation but also the first attempts to organize knowledge into systematic categories: mammals, birds, fish, insects, and beyond, with attention to internal structure, reproduction, behavior, and adaptation. The Lyceum itself became a center of this unprecedented scientific enterprise. Aristotle created an environment that blended research, teaching, and experimentation. Students were not passive listeners, they were participants in discovery. They assisted in dissections, recorded observations, and brought specimens from the surrounding city, countryside, and coastlines. Fishing expeditions were organized, and travelers were questioned for their reports of strange or exotic creatures. Aristotle dissected sharks, rays, mollusks, and crustaceans, often demonstrating procedures to students while explaining the purpose of each organ. The act of teaching and learning became inseparable from empirical investigation. Philosophy and natural science were not distinct domains but a continuous dialogue between observation and reasoning. the influence of Aristotle's biological work endured for nearly 2 millennia. Medieval scholars in the Islamic world and Europe, Renaissance naturalists, and early modern scientists all relied on his observations as the foundation of zoological knowledge. While subsequent research corrected numerous factual errors, particularly in reproduction and development, the structure of Aristotle's inquiry persisted. His insistence on classification, comparison, and functional explanation became a template for scientific methodology. In many ways, Aristotle anticipated modern natural history: careful measurement, systematic categorization, attentive observation, and the synthesis of scattered data into coherent theories. Aristotle's engagement with the living world also reflected a philosophical principle central to his thought: the essence of a thing could not be understood purely through abstract reasoning. It had to be discerned through function and form in the observable world. This principle permeated his work across disciplines. In biology, the wing of a bird, the gills of a fish, or the segmented limbs of an insect revealed not only structure but purpose. In ethics, he sought the function of human action and virtue. In politics, he analyzed the practical workings of constitutions. The act of studying animals thus informed the very method by which Aristotle approached the wider world, reinforcing the notion that knowledge must begin with careful observation and proceed through reasoned analysis. Aristotle's physical engagement with the natural world, cutting, examining, measuring, sketching, also emphasized the intimate connection between thought and action in his pedagogy. The Lyceum was a theater of scientific exploration, where ideas were not spoken abstractly but demonstrated in flesh and form. He would show the digestive system of a bird, the gills of a fish, the sensory organs of reptiles, sometimes handling creatures still wet from the sea, and encourage students to trace connections between structure and function. This integration of observation, demonstration, and analytical reasoning created a powerful educational experience. Students learned not only facts but methods, the careful approach to inquiry that would define empirical science for centuries. Perhaps most importantly, Aristotle's immersion in the natural world challenged cultural assumptions of his time. Greek society, while rich in philosophy and thought, often approached nature from a distance. Dissection, the handling of blood and organs, and close examination of living creatures were often socially discouraged or regarded with distaste. Aristotle confronted this hesitation directly, insisting that knowledge required courage and engagement with the material reality of life. By doing so, he expanded the boundaries of philosophy itself, transforming it from abstract speculation into a discipline capable of describing, categorizing, and analyzing the living world. In this way, Aristotle's work in biology was both revolutionary and foundational. He was more than a philosopher contemplating the essence of things. He was a pioneer natural historian, a meticulous observer, and a methodological innovator. He demonstrated that the study of life could be systematic, rigorous, and philosophical at once. His dissections, observations, and classifications provided the first large-scale attempt to comprehend the complexity and diversity of living organisms, offering a framework that would influence thinkers from Galen to Linnaeus to modern zoologists. Aristotle's engagement with nature, therefore, was not merely incidental to his philosophical pursuits, it was central to his intellectual vision. By confronting the living world directly, he bridged the gap between thought and reality, theory and observation, abstraction and empirical detail. He showed that understanding the world demands careful attention to the material, the observable, and the measurable. In doing so, he transformed the Lyceum into an institution where philosophy and science were inseparable, where learning was an active exploration, and where the living world became both subject and teacher. In an era when most philosophers recoiled from the messiness of life, Aristotle plunged into it fully, examining creatures, recording behaviors, dissecting structures, and seeking the principles that governed all living beings. He treated animals with curiosity, rigor, and a sense of purpose, recognizing in their forms and functions the keys to understanding the broader patterns of existence. His work reminds us that knowledge is not the product of abstract contemplation alone but of persistent observation, careful documentation, and relentless inquiry into the reality that surrounds us. In embracing the tangible, Aristotle created a lasting framework for the scientific study of life, one that continues to shape how we understand, classify, and investigate the living world even today.